Malcolm Louie here. Welcome to Eversprint.com. Today we're speaking with Josh Watts, the CEO and co-founder of MedTrust Medical Transport, a fast-growing company that provides emergent and non-emergent medical transport in the Lowcountry and Grand Strand areas of South Carolina. Josh grew his company's revenue from $1.5 million in 2014 to $5.4 million in 2017, a 256% increase. And now they're on track to hit $10 million this year. Welcome to the call, Josh.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
So Josh, how did you do it? How did you grow your company's sales so fast?
We're in a traditional business that happened to achieve the hockey stick that everybody talks about. And, we've answered this question quite a few times over the last 2 years, but the real answer is not all that complex. We decided to focus on a very specific area of our industry, which is hospital interfacility transports. We understood, based on that focus, what to say no to from a business perspective. And then we were able to get a lot of really high-powered folks from all over the country, really, to buy into that focus, buy into that kind of niche, and come join us here in Charleston. So that's really, great people, great plan.
So would you say then the biggest driver of your huge increase in sales is from acquiring new customers, new clients, more than anything else?
Yeah. So, up until probably 2015 or so, MedTrust was operating like most ambulance companies, which is a diverse group of transport types. We were serving nursing homes. We were serving individual patients for transports for services such as dialysis or wound care. We were doing some work with hospitals, but not on a primary contracted basis. And so the biggest driver and why it's been able to kind of grow exponential on us is that we've started saying no to those things that were not either directly hospital related or complementary to the hospital. So right now, MedTrust has a mix of about 82% of our transports originate at a hospital or hospital-owned facility. And that's very, very unusual for our industry. And so with that, hospitals are learning and associating MedTrust with someone that does hospitals. So that's really the difference, is that we're not trying to serve many masters. We're really building the entire business to serve hospitals, which are certainly different hospital to hospital, but they all share similar opportunities that we're able to help solve.
How did you and your team come to the revelation that you're just going to focus on serving hospitals more so than everyone else?
So a couple of reasons. Healthcare reimbursement as a whole has a lot of downward pressure currently, a lot of negative pressure, if you will. So while costs are going up, revenue's going down on a overall basis. So basically, what we have been able to do is kind of focus on, at the end of the day, what we've been able to do is focus on the part of the business that is more contractual as opposed to kind of fluctuating with the market. Hospitals are always going to, have a need, whereas other parts of the business may ebb and flow a little bit more. For instance, assisted livings are a part of the business that go up and down with the economy. Of course, folks are always sick, but hospitals seem to be kind of at the center of what they call the medical home, or the center of healthcare for the country, and the way that reimbursement models are being built right now. So, for us, it was kind of go to the source, and the hospitals are very, very hard to convert to a client, but they're also even harder to lose. So there was just a lot of stability in that focus. That's the why behind, I guess, the reason for hospital focus.
Was it pretty obvious that hospitals should be your target, or was this a kind of a new concept for both you and your industry?
Obvious. So to me, if you understand your business, it became fairly obvious fairly quickly, but a lot of folks that own ambulance companies are burnout paramedics. Not that, that's not meant to be really negative, more to just shine a light on the background of some of the folks that are owning or running ambulance companies. For MedTrust, the co-founder, myself, my business partners, we have a very diverse background, not all of it in the ambulance industry. And so, things like finance and human resources and marketing and business development, things like that are taken for granted in other industries. In the ambulance business, they're not that common. So I'd say for the bystander looking at the industry, they would probably arrive at the same conclusion. Just sometimes when you're in the forest, you can't see the trees. So a lot of the people working in the industry, for whatever reason, didn't gravitate that way. But it was a deliberate decision. The decision was made probably 2015. We spent 2016 retooling the business from a personnel perspective, from an equipment perspective, from a training perspective. So it was about a 2-year process to land that first major health system contract. But since then, we've landed 4 additional in South Carolina, and then have some further expansion in the state, and even some outside of the state that'll be happening over the next 12 months.
Great. Fantastic. Now, are other companies following your footsteps as well, and also trying to target hospitals as their main source of business?
I'd say there are certainly companies that have arrived at the same place that we are, or the same conclusions, I should say. But the reality of it is there's a limitation on the number of hospitals, and it's probably the highest and most complex client to serve in this industry. So the barrier to entry is really the clinical requirements and just the business acumen required to do that well. And, our clients are being challenged right now from a reimbursement perspective. So they're looking for great partners that help them, save money, help them make money in some cases, and in a big way, help them manage risk. So quality and understanding where we fit in the continuum of care, that's the story that is really winning for us. And there's other companies that we certainly look to as leaders in the industry, and we look to learn from those folks. But we don't really measure ourselves typically against a competitor. We measure ourselves based on what's possible. And I think that's because of the makeup of the leadership group being so diverse. We challenge the status quo almost too often, I feel like. But I would say other companies, I'm sure, do some similar things. But in South Carolina, for instance, there's just over 100 ambulance companies. There are, I think, 10 that have more than 15 ambulances. So it's a very, very fragmented industry. So we're kind of the exception based on the size and the scale and those things.
Great. From a comparison perspective, how many ambulances do you have?
Currently have 33, although we expect that number to kind of be exponential over the next 12 months. Expect to probably be in the 50 to 60 range by the end of 2019.
And where would that place you with that many ambulances? How big a player will you be in the market?
So I would say that would put you in the top, probably, well, in South Carolina, it would place us, in the top 3%. And from a regional perspective, which is kind of our long-term goal, our 3 to 5 year goal is a Southeastern regional, focus and footprint. I think that would put us in probably the top 10%, maybe 15, top 10 to 15%.
Okay, good. Early on in the conversation, you mentioned how winning the hospital contracts is very difficult, but at the same time, once you win it, it's also equally challenging for your competitors to take it away from you. Can you shed more light on your process for winning the new business, and at the same time maybe shed some light on how it's so sticky?
Sure. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's basic blocking and tackling for most industries. We come with a multi-level engagement. with a hospital, both before they become a client and after. So we really come alongside the client and learn, what those same problems are that they all are trying to solve for, and then what the unique challenges are. And it's something that's really surprised me that it's not more prevalent in this industry. But we find time and time again that nobody's attacking the problems that way. Many people look at the services we provide as kind of a commodity-based service, more of a logistics play. What happens after the end of the medical care that the hospital's doing. But we very much look at our role as we call it medicine between the buildings. So we're actually ingrained more with our clients, and we start that process before they ever become clients by meeting their folks on the clinical side, meeting their folks on the administrative side, and then really the important part is connecting what the expectations are of those two groups, because they're different. The CFO's concerns, the COO's concerns are different from the chief nursing officer, chief medical officer, and how do we solve both of the problems? And that's what we do. It's a fairly long sales cycle typically. If we're talking about a new relationship, it could be a year or longer, but there's also opportunities that happen faster because of a need or a failure of a current provider.
Okay. When you start working or reaching out to the hospitals, I take it there probably aren't that many hospitals for you to target that are large enough, or are you open and interested in all hospitals?
I would say you're open and interested, but the funnel narrows fairly quickly. So what we are looking for is hospitals that have an equal commitment to quality, hospitals that are interested in process improvement, hospitals that are open to their vendors or partners engaging in a way that is beyond the kind of client-vendor typical relationship. We really like to engage and meet with often and dig in. And some structures, some hospitals, some personalities of the hospitals just aren't set up for that to be successful. So I would say the funnel looks as if it's a larger funnel, but when it's when it comes down to brass tacks at the end of the day, they're probably the top 25% of the hospitals are the folks that we're focused on.
Right. How many of those are there in the South Carolina area?
I'd say in South Carolina, there's probably 20 potential clients, maybe 25 if you look at some of the hospitals that have satellite locations, smaller locations. So maybe 20, 25 target clients in the state.
And how many of those are working with you now?
Right now, 5.
5. Oh, wow. You got some good opportunities ahead of you then, if you're only at 5 now.
We have right now some of the largest systems in the state. So, number of hospitals versus dollar value or run or transport volume are kind of two different things. So we work with some of the folks on the larger end of that top 20 or 25. So it's probably out of that group about a 40% market share, 35% market share in the state right now.
Okay. So, once you're working with them, you're working closely with them, you're partnering with them to help them with, reducing risk, reducing costs, maybe creating some revenue opportunities for them as well.
Sure. Are
your competitors doing the same sort of thing, or are they just taking a different approach? Okay.
No, what they typically do, or at least what we hear, again, it all depends on who you're competing with, right? But
yep.
What we're typically hearing is competitors are either not sophisticated enough to even start that kind of conversation, or they may be very large or cocky or both, and come in and say, we're the experts in our part of the business. Let us tell you how this is going to work. And we believe that there's a sea of opportunity in the middle of those two mindsets, being nimble enough to work with clients on an individual basis, but yet big enough to bring systems and process to solve problems.
Right. So do your clients at the end of the day, when they factor in all the value that you provide, right? I mean, the value you provide isn't simply just a lower cost per ride, right?
Oh no! In fact, our cost is we're in a weird industry, so we have very little pricing elasticity. If you take a compliant mindset, there really is a price that you should not go below, and that's in our world. That's the Medicare rate. That's kind of the floor, if you will. Now, I'm not saying competitors don't do that in an effort to gain business, but we don't. And most great hospitals, that's really, I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but in the big scheme of their overall financial P&L, it's a rounding error. So for us, it's really a value question because they're going to pay the same amount for bad service or great service. So where we come in, sometimes they do agree to pay pay that good compliant rate, and they're happy to do that because of the great service they're getting. But occasionally there are hospitals that say, hey, we need to look at the budget, we need to cut here and cut there, and as long as we can do it in a compliant way, then we'll talk with them about that, and we'll learn, are there appropriate things that can be done that we can, weigh in on. But at the end of the day, we're very clear that MedTrust is a compliant company. They'll be able to sleep at night knowing that we will not be the reason why a regulator or the OIG or the Attorney General or the FBI or any of those folks are going to be in their building will not be because of us.
Right. Yeah, the cost of all those would be...
Oh, yeah, it's astronomical. Yeah.
Have you lost a client yet so far? And if yes, what happened?
So we haven't yet. Obviously, there's a couple of initial clients that don't necessarily fit our current focus on hospitals. And we regularly kind of revisit that list and look to see how to manage that. But we've taken the position that Charleston's our home. That's our headquarters. These folks that we are partnered with in Charleston that are not hospital facilities are really what has helped us build a foundation. And, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we have not lost a client, lost a contract, et cetera. So we have not at this point done that. If we were to ever separate from a client, though, it would be because our focus is too far removed, from their focus. And if that becomes the case, I think from a business perspective, it's the right thing to do, to allow the client to get someone more aligned with their business. But at this point, we've been able to manage that.
Fantastic. Now, how are you keeping track of what the client's alignment is and what your firm's alignment is and measuring the gap between the two and making the decision maybe you might need to make some adjustments to minimize that gap as opposed to letting them go? How are you tracking that?
Well, a lot of it in our world is geographic based. So if we had a client, for instance, that was in an area that we served that was the only client in that geography, everything else is 30 minutes away or across town, et cetera. That's a big driver because again, there is a portion of our business that is logistics based. So if we're unable to serve that client well, or if they at too high of a level removed from our ability to serve the hospital and other clients well, then geography would drive a lot of that analysis. And so we measure everything. We're a very data-driven company, so we measure on-time performance. We measure what they call time on task, so how long it's taking us to do various pieces of the transport cycle. We measure performance, of course, from a trending perspective. So we're really looking to see, is there a trend or a pattern that is either adversely affecting our core business, or are they being adversely affected by our core business? And so there's 6 or 8 KPIs that answer that question, and we watch those. And if there's movement, then every time we kind of see a variance that's plus or minus 10%, then we're going to start asking that question again and just revalidating that it's still a good fit.
Right. When you have seen those variances happen, how quickly is your team able to make an adjustment to bring it back in line with what you're targeting?
Well, it depends on why, you have to do a root cause and figure out what's causing the variance and, do a gap, as you mentioned, to understand whether it was a systemic issue or an occurrence or even singular issue. But I'd say for the most part, we're able to adjust. We try to use data from an analytics perspective statistically. So what you don't want to do is whipsaw based on a bad day or even a bad week in some cases, although we're aware of that and watch it. We do some rolling analysis, so 4, 6, 8, and 12-week analysis. And depending on the severity of the variance, we may start making minor adjustments, after a week of seeing it, but the total cycle time to, for instance, change a deployment or add additional resources in an area, all of those things can take, as little as a day and as long as 30 days. If the variance is, 20% or 30%, then it may take longer because it requires additional, ambulance assets or additional staffing to be hired, et cetera. But most of the time it's more tweaks. We call it turning the knobs. A lot of times
Right.
it's hey, we've got the right number of ambulances on, we have the right number of, hours allocated, but maybe they're not in the exact right place. So we do things called demand analysis where we trend our call times and when did they come in and how does that look by day of week, by hour of the day, by area of the town. And you create kind of hot maps, if you will, that's really what we're looking at. Do we have the resources where they need to be at the right time?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then maybe you need more resources. If the answer is no, you don't have to spend any more money. You just have to manage it better.
Right. At the beginning of our call, you had shared with me how you're on track to make $10 million this year.
Yes.
Right? And you're almost doubling your business from last year.
Correct.
Is that simply because you have new contracts with new hospitals that are about ready to be signed and done, or are you somehow able to get more business from your existing client base?
So part of that is we were on about an $8 million run rate at the end of 17, but from an annualized perspective, the end of year total number was as you mentioned, roughly half of what it will be in 18. So a lot of our onboarding took place in 17 between April and November. And so the impact of all of that addition, a lot of that is being felt for the first time this year. And then on top of that, yes, we've won some additional new business and, have figured out how to, to drive business with our existing accounts. But I would say a lot of the impact this year has been kind of fully realizing the wins from 2017 and then picking up a couple of smaller wins. But we did that on purpose. So we made a decision last year to focus on some smaller, more complementary tuck-in type business, geographically complementary to what we're doing with the larger systems. And the idea was, we had really almost 400% growth from 2016 to end of 2017 from a resource perspective. So we added, 120 employees. We built out processes that would work for 40 employees, but not for 180 employees. And, so we determined that now was the time to press pause and rebuild the foundation out again, relook at all of our systems again, so that we could kind of double again. So that's basically the place we're at right now is the back office, the functional areas, the software scaling. All of those things have been relooked at, retooled as necessary to allow us to go from kind of 10 to that next level, 25 million, 30 million or so.
Right. So having the capacity to deliver the services that your clients want.
Yeah, and a lot of really key hires. We were very flat from an organization perspective at 40 employees. Not a lot of layers. Not a lot of people wearing a lot of hats. Now as we've grown and spread out a little bit geographically and from a headcount perspective, a lot of my relief is in being able to peel off those hats and hand them to the people that are experts in those areas. Moving from, hey, I can do that thing to, hey, I'm an expert at that thing. And that's really what's happened this year. We focused on that, added 5 or 6 key members to our leadership team that are really focused on their functional areas as opposed to the overall.
Right. Now, you talked a little bit about generating more business from your current clients. How does your team do that? How do you maximize the value that you're providing to your clients and in turn getting maximizing the amount of sales business that you're doing with them as well?
So a vast majority of it is performance driven. So, unlike many industries, at the end of the day, a hospital has to make the decision that's ultimately right for the patient. So if our efficiencies and understanding of the client allows our resources to be deployed more effectively, then we are going to be the right answer more often. So we're the primary or first call in a contract situation. But if we're unable to perform to expectations, obviously the facilities are going to call another provider. A lot of our growth is in how well we understand and then tweak our business to be the right answer more often. So whereas you may capture 90% of a contract opportunity in the first 90 days, over time you're able to get better and move that from 90 to 92 to 93 to 95. And we have metrics internally. We have an expectation to capture greater than 95%.
Right. How often do you discover a new opportunity that's a bit outside of your skill set or service set at this time, but then you say, this looks like something that I can offer to all our other clients as well, so we're going to invest and put this into our toolkit that we can offer to our clients? How often does that occur?
For us, that happens in many different areas. So it could happen on the software side. For instance, there's a tool that will help our clients have better visibility to their transports or the performance, and many times we'll make those types of investments and offer that to clients. Visibility and transparency is very much a part of our our makeup, and so a lot of those things are software related and just giving that transparency. But also, it could be a specific. Say a specialty, a hospital that has a specialty in a certain area that requires MedTrust to invest in additional training or additional equipment to serve that patient population. We may say, okay, that's now become a core competency. We're able to deliver that in a particular market. Let's raise the baseline of our core competency and spread it out over all clients. Even if they don't specialize in it, now we're able to offer a service or offer an expertise that wouldn't typically be available. So we, for instance, if there's a hospital that focuses on pediatric care, we in that particular area, are going to build a program that has specific training to that patient population. And then we may take that pediatric program that's been built and said, let's spread it out over all of our footprint and offer it to everybody.
Right. One last question for you, Josh. For the hospitals out there who are listening to this interview now who are interested in doing business with MedTrust, what's the best way for them to contact your team?
I'll preface this a little bit. We have a number of folks that are involved in that kind of conversation from a clinical perspective, from a straight business development type perspective. But I'd welcome someone to reach out directly to me. I know that's a little unorthodox, but I'm very involved in the business and certainly can direct traffic, if you will. So my email is josh.watts@ridemedtrust.com. So my email is probably a good first place to start, and I'll certainly get someone to the right person to answer their questions.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today, Josh, and sharing how you grew your company so fast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
We've been speaking with Josh Watts, the CEO and co-founder of MedTrust Medical Transport, about his company's rapid growth. For interviews with other fast-growing companies or to learn how we can increase your firm's high-ticket sales through automation, visit Eversprint.com.